It's February 18th, 2023. It's the Bill King Show on CIUT 89.5. And of course, the occasion of the year has arrived. My co-host here at the big moment in her life. She turns 99. Jessica Bellamy, yes. Congratulations on the big 99.
The big 99. You know, it's a milestone, Bill. And
but you sound so young.
I know. I almost sound like I'm around like 40, right?
You're 39 going on 40 now, right?
I am turning 40.
Okay.
And you know what?
What?
It's good. It's good. Yeah. You know, I'm feeling good about it. I have a lot of things planned just to relax, just to ease into this new year. I'm going to do some baking. Some spa days, and lots of eating.
That sounds like what you did at 38 and 37.
Yeah, but you know what? It's at a slower pace. I probably won't. I won't be drinking as much or staying out as late.
By your own choice, you're domesticating yourself.
Yes. Yep. Okay. And you know what? I'm also getting my cards read. Bill.
What cards are these? Are they Crazy Eights or what?
Crazy Eights, a little blackjack, and some tarot.
These are tarot
cards.
All right. What's the story been in the past? Have they been positive? Something, one of those weird cards with somebody in the cape? What's going on? What's with the cards? Right.
Yeah. So in the past, it's probably been like 4 years. A lot of those things have happened and actually have recently happened between you and I, Bill.
Okay.
And then I'll tell you about that later. But I love the idea, and I welcome the idea of just, I don't know, like figuring out what's unknown, you know, and feeling like the energy and someone else tapping into that energy and saying like, hey, you know, take a look at this. You're on the right track for that, you know? So it's kind of nice. It's a nice ease into the year.
Now,
and even if you do get one of those cards, like the devil card, that usually means like a big change is going to happen. It's not necessarily something negative.
So this is like somebody that would have a 4 or 5 year plan, except you're letting the cards determine that.
You know what? I have the plan, but you know what? I want to see what's happening in between.
In between. Now, are you still planning on Argentina?
Oh, yes. In April.
Argentina. Yeah.
Argentina, Patagonia, and will probably be the first stop. And then from there, we'll head up to Buenos Aires, into the city.
I'm thinking Bloor, Davenport, maybe Hyde Park. That's about it. Is Jules going on this one with you?
Yes, he is. He's a good travel buddy.
Now, will he carry all your equipment?
No. You know what? I'm a big girl. I carry all my backpack stuff. So
you travel light, or do you carry like a Coleman lamp? You know, the cooking ware and stuff.
Well, we will be hiking, so our travel will consist of mostly backpacking. So we may have some light, you know, camping gear, you know, like a little grill and like a canteen, those sorts of things. But I'm looking forward to it. Hiking in Patagonia.
Jessica, we got to roll on with a show, but I got to say happy birthday from all of us. Christine and I are here, and we're saying happy birthday to you too.
Thank you.
Yes. On the show today, I look back at Guido Basso. I interview Brian Barlow. He talks about the many years with him. He passed away at 85. Jesse's talking about everything from the Superbowl, music, everything on. Gloria Martin, 1883, 1923, the films. And you talk to who?
I revisit a conversation with multidisciplinary artist Muna Malik. So we get into some conversation that we didn't have a chance to air because of time constraints, the broadcast.
Yeah.
But it's a poignant conversation about representation and culture and all that stuff. So looking forward to it.
Here we go. It's a Bill King Show on CIUT 89.5.
Oh, yes. Guido Basso.
But you two have had a long-running, close relationship. Probably more so than, I can't even think of another musician closer than you, maybe than Mo Kaufman.
I've worked with Guido for 50 years.
50 years.
And we became actually close very, very quickly, actually. I think, I don't know how that happened. We just seemed to, when I was in the Boss Brass, it was Eugene Amaro and Guido and I who hung out together, and we just became very close. And then of course with me, when he bought the farm out in Prince Edward County, I started coming out to see him right away because my family, this is where I was born, and so when my daughter Emily Claire was really little, we were coming out there, and then our farm is just 5 or I think maybe 7 minutes away from his out here. So, the last 20 years we've been neighbors.
Now, when you say farm, is this a working farm or is this a farmhouse with a barn? What is it?
Ours is a working farm. It's 114 acres, and we have a farmer we work with, and we grow soybeans, corn. We started growing winter wheat a few years ago. So it's been this has been a farm for 200 years. This place where we are, the house is 180 years old. It's a stone farmhouse. And Guido had about 35 acres, and he and Chrissy always had horses there at their place.
And that was his passion.
That was her passion.
Her passion, right?
Yeah. He went along with it.
He went along with it. Now, how would you describe the farmhouse? I mean, was it laid up in the music room in typical farmhouse, or did he have it laid out differently?
Well, they put on, when they first bought that place, and it actually was Marty Morell who found that place. Mm-hmm. Marty Morell's ex-wife, Craigie, was an equestrian, and they found this place, and Marty just didn't want to move out here. So he called Guido, and he said, "There's a place you better go look at." And this is probably 40 years ago or something, so Guido and Chrissy came to look at it, and they fell in love with it. And it had 2 houses on the property originally, along with all the barns and outbuildings. There's quite extraordinary outbuildings as well. And they sold one of the buildings, and it was moved away. And so Chrissy and her mother were in the interior design business. Chrissy's mother was Sheila, and she owned a very upscale design business in Yorkville, and Chrissy worked there. So, of course, the place looks beautiful. And they collected all these old Ontario pine pieces that are in there. And then some time ago, they put on a big addition at the side. But Guido has a room there with a grand piano in it and a fireplace. It's his own little space, and that's where he practiced every day. And it was a place where we spent a lot of time having some really wonderful meals and hanging out together.
He was great company, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I really cherish the fact that, well, first of all, getting to make music with him for 50 years was extraordinary. But getting to hang out with him and just sit in, I don't know what you want to call it, break bread, whatever. But he came from that Italian tradition where eating and meals were really important, and we would go. We went over there a lot. Sometimes at the last minute he'd call, and he'd say, "Jimmy Dale's here. Come on over for dinner," or Jens Lindemann's here. So, somebody. We would just spend a lot of time just sitting at that table, drinking wine and eating food. Sometimes you'd go over there and there'd be 3 or 4 people cooking different parts of the meal. It was Ron DeLoro, the trumpet player.
Oh yes, yeah.
Well, Ron would be there, and I got to meet Guido's trumpet teacher. And I remember the first time he called me, and he said, "My trumpet teacher's coming over for the weekend. I want you guys to come over a few times." And I thought, his trumpet teacher, how old is this guy? And Johnny Mariano. And turns out that Johnny was only 10 years older than Guido. So he was 19 when he started giving Guido trumpet lessons. And,
that's right.
And Johnny was a working musician, and got to know him well. And Chrissy's sisters, we hung out a lot with them. And I was just over there last night taking we made some chili, and I took some over for Chrissy because I figured she'd be, she's been on her own.
Now, what was his last days? What 85? You really just don't really question that.
Yeah.
But was he going through some issues towards the end?
Well, he had a bad fall.
Okay.
Just after Christmas, and he broke. And Guido did have a knee replacement surgery, and it didn't go well many years ago. He had to have it done 3 times, and it just drove him nuts. All the physiotherapy and the pain. And he fell in his driveway, broke his fibia right up near his hip, so they treated it as a hip injury. And he was in the hospital for a month and just kind of faded away.
Right. But what a full life. I was looking at that clip, and I hadn't seen this before, the one on the Johnny Cash is hosting, and they having to duel with Al Hirt. That is a classic.
Yeah. And that was done before. All of these TV people who had their start on the CBC, people like Chris Beard and Norman Jewison, when they went to the States, first of all, they had a leg up because at the CBC they had done everything. They'd done writing, they'd done producing and directing, and that was unusual in Hollywood, where people are specialists, and that's why those guys did so well. So I think it was, I don't remember who the actual guy was that went down there, but when he did the Johnny Cash show, he'd already done that routine in Toronto on a television show with Arnie Tchaikovsky and Guido.
Okay.
And that one, the roles were reversed. Guido played the good guy. Arnie was the gunslinger coming into place. So they were reprising that down there. And there's a cute story with that too. They because they were doing it wasn't live. It was live to tape back then. But they, how TV used to be. You'd rehearse for a whole week, and dress rehearsals and all this stuff, and then you just try and get the thing done in one shot. And so they had the whole routine worked out where they play the licks back and forth, and finally Al Hirt plays the best lick, and that's it. Guido's done, right? And so at the dress rehearsal, they got to that point, and they had done it by then a million times. They got to dress rehearsal, and Al played his final lick where Guido's supposed to be finished, and Guido puts the horn up to his lips and plays something just fucking killer. Off script, and the whole place is quiet. And Al Hirt says, "You're not going to do that to me during the show, are you?" Guido said no. Guido was just, a little testosterone there,
You gotta love that. There's so many great moments. Give me one of the high points working with Guido.
Well,
I mean, you have your big band.
Yeah,
Guido
but I'll tell you something. Getting to produce. So Guido came in the studio, and I think the first time I worked with Guido in the studio was with some of the early Emily Clare albums, and we brought him in to play with us on those, and of course that was different for me. Instead of being in the studio with him, I was on the other side of the glass, and it was a whole different experience. And I also right around that time produced an album for the Caliban bassoon quartet of all things, but Guido played on that too, and by then I had kind of worked with him a bit as a producer, and it was a whole different experience because I got to sit there and I just it kind of overwhelms you how good he is, like every note he plays. When he wants to do multiple takes of something, I say, you're just going to leave me with a pile of problems because they're all going to be fantastic, and then when Guido was under-recorded, and we used to sit around the table in their farmhouse and talk about getting him to record and why he didn't record more. And he said, I don't really feel like. He said, what if I drive all the way to Toronto, and we got the session set up, and when I get there, I don't feel like playing, or I'm having a bad day with my chops, and it's a big deal. And he said, and I cannot stand the planning of an album, like picking the tunes and deciding what order they're going in and all this junk. He said, and the tension and the stress, I hate it. So we worked for about 10 years talking about this, and we even had one time when we had a session booked, and he canceled it the day before. And so knowing all of these things that bugged him, when I found a really great recording studio in Belleville, I said, I got a great idea, Guido. We're going to record in Belleville. And then you just come across the bridge, and we know the guys who own the studio really well. If you don't feel like it, it's not a big deal. And what we'll do is, when musicians are in the county doing other gigs, we'll grab them while they're already here. And we'll just do maybe duos, you know. So if Mark Eisenman is here, or Robbie Botosh or somebody, or John Sherwood, we'll grab them. And he said, well, are we making an album? I said, no, we're just recording. Let's just make it fun. We'll just go in and we'll record and we'll have fun. And so we did the first one, and he had fun. And then one of the rules I set for everybody is there's no pre-planning, no phone calls about what tunes you're going to play, no charts. I want you guys to just sit in that room like you're in Guido's living room and say, let's play whatever, you know. And so we just started doing that. So when, you know, Rob Pilch was out here, or Lon Lasky, or Don Thompson, Phil Dwyer, I would just organize around the schedule they had in the county, and we'd go over to the studio where they had a beautiful piano, 7-foot Yamaha piano that was just gorgeous. And so after 2 years, Guido says to me, do we have enough stuff for an album? And I said, we got enough for 2 albums. And he said, so are we doing an album? I said, I thought you didn't want to. You know, I said, what I did then, so one other thing I did, which was interesting, Bill, is I never let him hear any playbacks. Basically, he and whoever he was playing with stayed in the studio, and I stayed in the control room with the engineer. And, you know, I didn't want them to do more than 2 takes of anything. If they started struggling over a tune or what the changes were to the bridge or whatever they were in, I said, let's pick another tune. And we we recorded the entire time that they were in there. And so I said, okay, if you want to do a CD. So I went back and I picked the first, I think, 10 or 11 things that I wanted, and I did all the editing, mixing, and mastering, and then I brought it to him. And so some of the stuff it was 2 years earlier that he had done it. And we sat again around that beautiful table in their farmhouse, and I played it for him, and he cried. And he said to me, I got to tell you, he said that in all my years in the studio and recording, that's the most like me I've ever heard. That's the most like what I want to be on record, you know. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me. I mean, that made the whole thing so worthwhile.
It's hard. It's hard with some people, especially when they're so in tune to what they do, to have them, to convince them to let go.
Yeah.
You know, and we've both as producers been in the same situation where you're working with people and they're very sensitive about everything that goes down, and they want to do another take, another take, another take, another take, and you know right from the first take or the second take, it's beyond anything you can imagine. You know, so it's.
But there are. It's funny. The other thing that I've learned is that some people actually do get better.
Yeah.
Like Guido's first take is usually the best.
Yes.
But working with Russ Little, Russ will sometimes want us to play a tune over and over again for like 3 hours, play one tune.
Yeah.
And the thing I learned about him is he gets better every time.
Yeah. Totally different.
Hones in on something, and apparently Bill Evans was like that in the studio, that he would just want to do it over and over, and he would find new ideas and then come back and do it in a different key, you know, the next take. And but anyway, and you know what it's like too, when you've done the same as me, where you produce things that you play on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by the time you finish the recording and you do some editing and you do some mixing, for me anyway, I can't stand my own playing anymore.
Oh no, I don't want to hear it.
I hate everything that I've done, and it takes me years to be able to listen to it objectively. So that's what I wanted to create with Guido. I want to avoid that, so that the things were really fresh to him. And we still have. I put something up on Facebook yesterday, a track that we'd never released before. I got still a whole bunch of stuff from those sessions that Chrissy wants us to do something with, and I'd be happy to, because he played brilliantly on it. And so I think that was one of the highlights for me, was actually being able to make those recordings happen for his Changing Partners CD. But you know, Bill, being on when I played in the Boss Brass, I got to tell you that there was never a performance we did anywhere over the 17 years I was there that I didn't sit there and with my mouth open and couldn't believe the players I was surrounded by. And there would always be, in every concert, some highlights, and they would come from actually a very few of the band was able to just every time we played reach some kind of heights that you couldn't believe, and Guido was one of those people. And I realized how big a deal he was. I mean, he's always was a big deal in my mind, but you know, you work with him every day, and people in Toronto, you know, he's playing in clubs and people go see him. But I played in Dante's in Hollywood for the first time with the Boss Brass, and the Boss Brass was a big deal, but the bigger deal was Guido Basso.
Isn't that amazing?
He was the star of the show, and when we did a little setup and a sound check in Dante's in the afternoon, and we were close enough to the hotel. We stayed at the Beverly Garland Howard Johnson. You know who Beverly Garland was?
Yeah. Yes.
She was the mother on my three sons.
There you go.
Anyway, so we could walk. So I walked back, and you know, I'm about 40 minutes early for the show. I walk back, and there's a lineup around the block. And I'm walking past this lineup, and I say to myself, that's Henry Mancini. You know, there's Shelley Mann. You know, and then I see the whole Dionne Warwick, and then I see the whole sax section from the Tonight Show band. So I get to the door, and the doorman recognized me from the afternoon, and I said, when are you letting these people in? And he said, that's for the second show.
That's extraordinary.
And I thought, Henry Mancini's going to stand out there for like an hour and a half, you know? And when Guido stood up and played, I mean, every trumpet player in Hollywood was there going nuts over him, you know? And people telling me about how they're transcribing his solo in Portrait of Jenny, and you know, and all that stuff. But you know, never ever did that ever go to his head. Like, he was so modest,
always humble.
Yeah, always humble, and you know, and he would invite people over to his house. He'd hear somebody's son was a trumpet player, and he'd say, "Well, let him come over to the house," and they'd play together. You know, and one of the guys in my band, his mother took him over to see Guido when he was a very young teenager. You know, and of course he lives in this area, so he's a professional player, so he's had a lifelong relationship with Guido. But
well, Brian, I want to thank you so much for this. This is fantastic.
It's I will certainly miss playing with him, but you know, I'll.
It's Gloria Martin on Entertainment. Gloria Martin's here on Entertainment, still in the Sunshine State. Nowhere near returning.
No, not yet. Not yet.
But you've healed.
You'll let me know.
You've healed
Let
up.
me know when it's warm enough.
You go to Florida just for the healing salts.
I do. You know, I haven't felt this healthy in a year. Swimming nearly every day, yoga, long walks, and breathing that salt air. And it really does make a difference. So I'm happy for that. A lot of aches and pains that I've accumulated since COVID have melted away, and I feel strong and healthy. It's a good feeling.
Any good viewing?
Any good viewing? Well,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
yeah.
I finally got to see 1893 with Sam Elliott, Faith Hill, and Tim McGraw.
1883, yeah.
1883, sorry, yeah.
And what do you think?
And I was blown away by, Sam Elliott, I'm not surprised. He's a supreme actor, gave a primo performance. But Faith Hill and Tim McGraw?
Oh, my goodness.
Wow. Where did they come from in the acting genre? They did a bang-up job.
It's a phenomenal story, too.
It really is. And the young girl, Isabel May, wow. What is she? I mean, she holds the whole story together. It's quite amazing. Such a sweeping saga, and it's so realistic, a depiction of how brutal and incredibly treacherous the conditions were as the Duttons get across the Great Plains in covered wagons. And it's just very realistic that way. I did find it a bit fanciful in places in terms of her love affair with the gorgeous First Nations man.
I know.
But,
that was...
you know, it was a bit like, okay, maybe not.
She had the nice clothes, too, didn't she?
She did, yeah. But it was a beautiful love story. That was quite lovely.
And plus, it's the fact that the folks start from Texas and they go north.
Yeah.
This is a story of the Swedes and others that came to America during that period looking to start a new life.
The ethnic mix surprised me.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that. Yeah.
And then the journey, many just died on the way. There's just no way they could beat either what they were up against, the bandits, or just the climate or just the terrain.
Yeah. Or just the fact that they'd never been allowed to swim. They didn't know how to swim.
Yeah.
They probably didn't know how to make a campfire. I mean, just no basic skills.
Was it episode 6 of 1923?
Yeah, just watch that. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
my goodness.
Beautiful. Yeah. Whew.
Christine says the other night, I could cry. She goes, that's one of the greatest love affairs on film.
Well, isn't that funny? Because Gene said the same thing. Said one of the greatest all-time love scenes ever. And truly it was just beautiful. Really, the whole episode was focused on the love story.
Brandon Skelnar?
Don't know them at all.
Or
Not
Julia
at all.
Schaffner?
Yeah, her I have seen in a couple of British things, but I'm not overly informed on her career. But boy, what a job!
What chemistry? Chemistry is amazing.
It was, yeah, very strong, and her portrayal of a strong woman in that era, very unusual and very believable.
Still, we love Helen Mirren. She's so good.
She is. She's amazing. She tells off Harrison Ford. You can almost see the little hairs on his forehead kind of stand on end, like she really means this. I wanted to mention that we did 1883, 1923. Now Yellowstone. Well, nothing is official or confirmed yet, but they are saying that Kevin Costner could be leaving Yellowstone after season 5. He's got other projects, especially a pet project called Horizon. And there's a scheduling conflict, I guess, with that and with Yellowstone. Maybe there's a money conflict, too. There's always something about money, isn't there?
Yeah,
and the writer, Taylor Sheridan, says he's looking at Matthew McConaughey to star in the saga come season 6.
That'd be interesting. I thought last season it ran out of story. I thought it fell flat. It can't keep up with 1923 or 1883. It's just not that kind of quality.
Well, and then perhaps a change of a cast member might give it the pickup that it needs. You never know. Yeah. I had a chance to catch an older film that I hadn't seen on Netflix called Official Secrets with Keira Knightley. Also stars Matt Smith, Matthew Good, and Rhys Ifans. Now, Keira's not always my favorite, but here she just gives an excellent portrayal of a British intelligence whistleblower, Catherine Gunn. It's a true story. She tried to prevent the 2003 Iraq War by leaking a top-secret document that showed the U.S. was trying to illegally spy on several UN Security Council officials in order to get them to vote for the war. A war, of course, as you know, that made no sense. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found. And it also led to the end of Tony Blair's political career after he sided with Bush and the U.S. in support of the war. Here's a clip where you'll hear Keira as Catherine Gunn. She, of course, faces jail time and persecution for treason for leaking this document.
Let's have a listen.
What we know is that Saddam has this material.
We don't know that. I mean, he just keeps repeating the lie. Just because you're the Prime Minister, it doesn't mean you get to make up your own facts.
Someone in this building has betrayed their country. If you are found to have withheld information, you will be charged with a breach of the Official Secrets Act.
I've got something you need to see.
Who brought you this?
Be careful.
If this is real, you could go to jail just for having it in your possession.
You're a spy. You work for the British government.
No, I work for the British people. I do not collect information so that the government can lie to the British people.
Intelligence may be being manipulated to take this country to war.
This paper needs to stop taking Tony Blair at face value.
You had nothing to gain and everything to lose.
This could result in a prison sentence.
Do you want to risk it all?
This war is historically unpopular. It's everywhere. Every country. Biggest demonstration in human history.
If we do not go public,
We would be conceding that no one can ever tell the people when their government is lying.
The war is illegal. The public is entitled to know why.
my motive was to stop a war and save lives. I have to tell the truth.
Now, they called Tony Blair Bush's poodle. Remember that?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
It
really,
sit well.
And it really comes through in the film. And at the end of the film, they show the real Catherine Gunn, and they roll the sad stats on the war that went ahead anyway and led to the death of over 1 million Iraqis and thousands of American soldiers. So another useless war.
Absolutely. More, Gloria. What else?
Well, in theaters this week on the big screen, Ang Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is coming. And it's 23 years later, and it's a great chance to see it on the big screen. Such a beautiful, stunning film.
Fantastic.
Oh, the cinematography, the impossible flying choreography
Yes.
that, of course, it inspired the Matrix series. It's truly a masterpiece. And one of the film's stars, Michelle Yeoh, of course, is up for an Oscar this year for Everything Everywhere All at Once. So it's a great chance to see her early on in a fabulous role.
And Your Honor is back with Bryan Cranston.
Yes, I haven't caught that yet. Have you?
Oh, yes. Did you see season 1?
I did.
Okay, season 2. It's a strange one, but it's really good. It's graft and corruption.
I did catch the Pamela Anderson story on Netflix. I thought, do I really care? I was really impressed with her. She's very honest in it. She wears no makeup. She's honest about being 50-something, a little overweight now, and she looks back very honestly at her mistakes, most of them marriages. You really get an insight into, she's just a sweet gal. She's a great mom who loves her 2 sons. She's been great to her mother and father. You know, I saw her with no makeup years ago, and I thought, wow, she's a really pretty girl, like fresh-faced Canadian gal. Mm-hmm. And then you put on all this makeup and do the hair, and it's like somebody else. It's an image. It's a Marilyn Monroe thing. It's not the real person, you know. And because of that image, she got really exploited, didn't make tons of money, and had the sex tape stolen, which sort of destroyed her emotionally. She's now getting back on her feet. She played Roxy in Chicago musical in New York, and there she's exploiting her own image to a good end for herself. So you're left liking her a lot and really wishing her the best. It's really quite charming.
You know what was great this week was the Brian Allen comedy music special. That was, like Smokey Robinson, Gladys Knight, Earth, Wind and Fire, and great comics. And then just an all-out riveting to performances by Tony Braxton.
Ah, nice. Now, what was that on? What
that was on NBC. I think it was last Sunday night on NBC.
Nice.
And it was a special, I think, leading up to Valentine's Day or whatever. But it was a 2-hour special that went from I think 8 to 10, and it caught me by surprise. But the performances, John Legend and all, were fantastic. They kept the comedy to around 3 to 5 minutes each person that came out. Ripping funny. But then in between was Tony Braxton. She did 2 numbers, and she's 55. Oh, man, can she dance? She can dance. She can sing. She can do everything that I don't think Madonna could hold up to her. I know Rihanna can't, but as far as when it comes to the dance thing,
yeah,
she still got it,
Wow. Sounds awesome.
Yes.
That's it for this week, Bill.
That's it. Okay, that's plenty.
I got some dolphins waiting for me in the ocean, so I better go.
Are they Miami type or what?
No. They're St. Pete dolphins.
St. Pete dolphins.
Yeah, much more sophisticated.
I got you. Thanks so much, Gloria.
Have a good week, Bill.
Okay. In the house, Jesse King. Welcome in, Jess. What's up with you, buddy?
It is that time. Well, we got a few things to cover this week, I think. We had the big moment last weekend with the Super Bowl, and there's a couple things that I think we need to discuss here.
Well, there's 113 million people tuned in, Jess.
Well, that's just it, right? So that was the rating, which I think they said is the 3rd highest rated show in the history of television, which is remarkable. Secondly, it was actually 118 million during Rihanna's performance, so 5 million change more.
And they were all from Barbados.
That's a lot of people. Yeah, but it's quite amazing that you already have that kind of viewership for, this sports event. It's unlike anything else in North America that's North American based. I mean, globally for a soccer match, you're going to probably get like 1 billion people, but for North America, it's quite remarkable. And then you have Rihanna, who goes along alone. She has no support. She has no backing band that you can see. All she has is dancers and her singing. And it was a big, bold statement. She did draw on 118 million viewers. So that's significant. So all the advertisers are happy. And it just shows you that she is still so relevant because she's got that kind of hip coolness factor still, even at this age and after being in this industry so long. Whereas when you look at a Beyonce, she's kind of a little bit more further down and she's more mainstream, even though they're both mainstream, but she's perceived a little bit more in a different light. So good for her to see that. But let's talk about Chris Stapleton's anthem.
It was beautiful.
That was just dynamite.
That was the night right there.
That guy can sing, and the emotion. He had grown men crying, man.
No, football players, coaches on the sideline, man.
Have you ever seen anybody make a grown man cry at a football game?
No. Only after the final score,
Exactly. So that was great. The top-rated, most viewed halftime performance ever was actually Katy Perry.
Really?
Yeah, she was number one, but she also had other acts with her at the time. And I think third was Beyonce with Coldplay, so the neck and neck. So that's great.
But when it comes down to performances, it was Prince still. He owns that. He owns any stadium.
Prince, yeah. Well, he's bringing something different. He's got the whole band and he's Prince. He's got a deeper catalog. So, yeah, that was great entertainment. Always fun to kind of gear up for the Super Bowl.
Now, what did you think of her performance?
I was at doing a Super Bowl party. So he had the Canadian version, then he had rented or got the American version.
Right.
And there were so many people that I could only kind of see it and watch it.
Okay, yeah.
From an angle. I caught a little bit of it. I still have to watch it. What I saw, it's a statement. That's really what that was. That was a bold statement. Yeah, to say, hey, here I am. I am the only one. I don't need any support.
Well, I looked at it and I thought, I have to measure it up against previous Super Bowl. And I thought Bruno Mars killed, and I thought the hip-hop tribute killed. Springsteen in the past did. And even Janet Jackson, you get past the malfunctioning stuff with Justin Timberlake. I always think of it as the big dance number, too. And I thought Rihanna's was more like a walkthrough, because it was like so overstaged in that it's a spectacle. She delivered that. I don't know if she delivered a performance, though. That was my thing.
I think I would agree with you. If I compare, visually, it looked really cool and interesting, but was it electrifying like the hip-hop tribute last year? The hip-hop tribute last year, I think, for me, was probably my favorite. Just simply, I'm biased that way, but it had so much going on and somewhere to look and something happening at all times that your eye and the music too. I mean, these were great, and you get to see Snoop Dogg, Eminem, all these people. So I found, you're right, that was a much more entertaining. Bruno Mars, and when he played with, and he had Anderson .Paak on, I think a few years ago.
You're absolutely right. That was great.
Yeah, you had that. Even Anderson .Paak played last year on the Super Bowl playing drums for one of the moments there. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, so they came out, Forbes comes out with their top entertainment earners every year. And this is what's really interesting. So of the top 10, 5 are musicians/bands, 5 are TV film related. Who's the number one?
Tell me.
$230 million. Genesis.
Oh, man.
This is the top earners of all. So what's really interesting in the top 5 are 3 legacy bands. Genesis, Sting at $210 million, and then the Rolling Stones at $98 million. So there's only one. This
from last year's touring? Or
that's from basically all total. So what your sales, your tours, whatever it is, this is the top grossing entertainment earners of last year. So when you see Genesis has been touring nonstop, but for a band that is 50 plus years, that's incredible to be number one.
Yeah.
Sting. I mean, Sting. He's just a guy can go anywhere, and you don't hear about him. He's there, but he's selling out like
he's filling stadiums.
Yeah, and he's just always doing something, but you don't hear about it. Like, he's crushed it. Only one female made it to the list total, and that was Taylor Swift.
Right.
And it was pretty much based on, because she wasn't touring, streams and album sales, which is amazing. And then one Latin artist, Bad Bunny, who's just like dominated. He was the number one streamed artist of the planet. And then the rest are like Tyler Perry, Brad Pitt, and etc.
So you have Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band are going on tour. 2023 tour, I think they're going to be out August, September, November, December. Tickets up to $1,000, Jay.
Oh, that seems inexpensive next to like Beyonce tickets, which are like going $6,000 and up. Yeah, they're very expensive. And so you've got the Madonna tour. So it's going to be a big summer for tours. I mean, I think Madonna will do better than Beyonce because she's just got a bigger fan base and, 40 years of this now, and we'll see.
Well, I think she sold like 600,000 tickets like the first day.
Yeah, which
crazy. And the Chicks are going out, who used to be the Dixie Chicks, one of my favorite all-time bands.
They're so good.
Yeah. They hadn't had an album out since 2006, and they have a new album coming out, or they had a new album out in 2020, and I always thought of them as one of the greatest bands out of Nashville. So talented, great singers, and socially relevant at the same time.
Yeah, always dynamite. It's just unfortunate they got that one moment
wrapped up with George Bush and the war.
Yeah, and they're just speaking their mind. The amendment law didn't apply to them,
no.
Unfortunately. They said, no, you don't get a pass for that. I mean, today, Bush seems like
it seems like a memory that,
he's like
should have never occurred.
Kid.
Yeah.
Well, he was not, when you comparatively compared him to, what just left office.
Oh my God.
That was lightweight. That was completely lightweight.
Yeah, it was right off.
And I was not aware of this, but this came out last year. It's Mr. A and Mr. M, the story of A&M Records. It's at least, I know it's two parts, possibly
Albert
more.
And
Yeah, exactly. And I just started the first one last night, about half an hour, because we all know the label, but this is kind of the evolution of how they came together and built up this label, and talked about the early days when they put out their own record. They originally called Carnival Records, and it was Herb and Jerry each had a side A and side B. They ended up just selling like crazy, and they had enough money that they had to change the name simply because there was already another Carnival Records out there. So they changed it to A&M. They got the lot, the Charlie Chaplin lot in Hollywood, and took that over, and that became their campus. And then they signed, I think, Sergio Mendes was one of their big ones. And he had you went through this, the Brazil 66.
That kept coming. The hits just kept coming. And also, Herb Alpert, he just had Taste of Honey and all those hits one after another. So he kind of supplied the label with some firepower, some money coming in.
Yeah, exactly. But what was interesting is that they took that campus that they had and they put everything in it. They had their own studio. They had everything you needed, so they could go to others. So, they had known Burt Bacharach, and then they came around to him after he did, I think it's one of the James Bond soundtracks, and got Herb involved. And then I said, Burt, why don't you put out your own albums, man? Come on over. Burt said, well, okay. So that kind of led to the whole thing that it's almost like Atlantic, where they had their own studios, a lot of these labels where you could come and just kind of be yourself and nobody's going to tell you what to do. And that just worked magic for these guys.
Well, I visited.
Did you?
Yeah, I went there in the 60s, and I was taken there because they had songwriters. And I don't know, I was working on trying to get a publishing deal or something like that, a writing thing. And I went there, and they had all these young songwriters in different rooms, and they were all working like a day gig.
It's every time I talk to you, I learn something new. I mean, you've met and jammed with Jimi Hendrix, of course, Janis. And then there was what was the label, Chess Records? I think you were there. Was it Chess Records?
No, Stax. We rehearsed there. Met Isaac Hayes. Yeah. I
mean, all these. It's like you sampled a taste of all the kind of amazing places.
You've seen Woody Allen and Zelig.
Well, this is it. This is exactly what I think of.
Standing next to the Pope, right?
Whatever it is, we're just going to insert your photo next to it.
No, but this was interesting because I went on that lot,
Yeah.
And it was fixed up nice. It was kind of like a tropical Western scene. And I walked through Herb Alpert's offices and stuff, right? And because it was all together there as far as, you kept an eye on the songwriters. And because you had the Carpenters and other, other folks there that had massive hits. But I wish I could remember all the songwriters because they were all big names. And
even the Carpenters or Burt Bacharach, all of those guys.
Yeah, but there were people who wrote numerous pop hits that were there, and they wrote daily. So I don't know why I was there, but I just had that flash that I remember visiting there and thinking, this is a cool place. And you're right, it was. It was a movie studio lot. It was Chaplin's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently Chaplin had actually had his house on the front side of it, so that was his backyard back in the day. But, just fascinating so far. I look forward to watching the other one. The last thing to just talk about is PBS is running a series called Fight the Power, How Hip-Hop Changed the World. It's on Tuesday nights at 9. Last night was part 2, focusing on the 80s. But they talk about the culture, the politics, everything, the civil rights movement, and how all of this affected and created this music and propelled it into what it is. So it's PBS, so you're going to get a little bit more of an in-depth look at the hip hop and its role in our world and society today versus, say, like, a different network doing kind of more fluff piece. So I think that's worth a watch. Part 2, there's 6 parts in total, every Tuesday nights at 9.
And also on Netflix is the Bill Russell documentary.
I saw that. Yeah. I got that on my list.
I watched the first 2 episodes. The man has 11 rings.
He's got more rings than fingers. I remember that line.
They showed his hands, and one finger's doubled up with a ring, right? But what a story, Jess.
Yeah.
Just the family moved from the deep South. They moved to Oakland when he was a teenager or whatever, a kid, to get him out of the racial horror show, and got to Oakland, and they found himself in a community. But that bridge that distance between Oakland and the white side of San Francisco was a big leap. But there was such a community there that as a kid he could grow up and learn and get a good education and then off to college. And the fact that he was at the beginning of it, he was there during the civil rights with Martin Luther King. I mean,
and he's with all those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was a big part of it,
with Ali, supported Ali.
Yeah. Outspoken. Yeah. And yet, it's interesting because Boston was such a divisive city because it was black and white. Yet the Celtics under Red Auerbach at one time put on the floor 5 African Americans. And you don't know if that didn't set off a firestorm in Boston or across the country. It was just not done. You had to have one white dude on the floor or maybe 3.
Right.
So, it's a good one. It's just like we watched the Shaq one recently, but Shaq's farther down the line. He's already benefited from a lot of changes in hoops and in the makeup of teams. Bill's there at the beginning. He's there, with Oscar Robertson and all the greats that had to endure so much just to get on the playing field. Just be part of that and not get screamed at every night and abused.
Yeah, and it's great to see all these docs coming out on specific people that kind of were pivotal in whatever the sports arena or music arena is, because it's like everybody's doing these docs. There was one that was on TV that I watched on Chris Boucher, just an hour doc, just talking about his upbringing. He didn't start playing ball till he was 16.
Yeah, that's right.
And, at one point, his mom's his rock, but she was with, I think, a dude, and that didn't work out. So he left home, and after he'd kind of worn out his welcome at friends' places, he had nowhere to go. And so he would end up riding the bus in Montreal across town all night just for somewhere that was warm and safe. And he did this on and off for 2 years, all the while trying to go to school and trying to play ball. But he would always play ball. That was his thing once he got into it. And, within a few years, he's in the NBA. So it's kind of a remarkable story.
We love those stories.
Lots to talk about.
Yeah. Next week, okay?
Yes.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Jessica Bellamy's in the house.
Before Black History Month comes to a close, I'd like to take the time to revisit an interview I had with LA-based multidisciplinary artist Melody last September. Using painting, sculpture, and photography, Muna's work explores abstract forms including elements of gesture and biomorphism, influenced by Arabic and Somali thought, Norse movements and migrations, the idea of liberation through movement, and the notion of identity formation. At the time, Guido was exhibiting her work, Elemental Moments, at MCA Gallery. We met there and talked at length about her beginnings, her points of inspiration, and her aspirations for meaningful, large-scale work. We talked so much that the interview's entirety could not fit into the live broadcast. So I'd like to highlight a specific point in the conversation where we discussed representation of racialized people. Importantly and quite directly, the unseen pressures of representing our identity and artistic expressions, and how to cope in spaces that may only see what is on the surface. Let's see what's up.
Being a Black female artist right now, there's this pressure to create work about my identity very head on that I think is pretty unfair. To assume that I have to make work specifically about that all the time. And I support all my friends that do create that work. I know it's important, and representation is really important. But by choosing to create work that isn't representational and isn't specifically about my identity, I feel that's my own justice. I get to take back the narrative in some ways. So that's kind of some of the ways that I'm thinking about it.
And I know even with myself, as someone in radio and broadcasting, as a Black woman, also an African-American woman, there is always that element of like that pressure, like, oh man, like if I'm doing a show, I should only have Black African-American women, or this and that from coming from this perspective, but it's like we are more than just what is seen, right? And then what is also assumed. How did you overcome those pressures when you made that decision, like, my identity does not have to be fully represented in every piece of art that I produce?
It's an ongoing battle and conversation. I'm really fortunate, and I think this is a huge recommendation I have to all young artists, or just artists in general, is creating a supportive community of other artists or curators and like-minded folks to have some of these tougher conversations as to what to create and when and how, and finding the importance in it. And some of my peers talking about there is this push and there is this hyper focus on work coming from us. And I think it's across the board. I've met authors that are also feeling the same pressures of people wanting them to write from their like childhood perspectives on what it feels like to be Black in America, and the need to push against that as well, and the importance of choice in the work that you create. But it's tough. As artists, we are also subject to having to live in this hyper-capitalist art market that values exploitation in some ways. And what does it feel like to play against that? Does it mean doing projects and works in art spaces that are not connected to the art world, that are for community, and continuing to push that while also simultaneously trying to change the other market landscape is a conversation that I think I'm really early on in my career, but I think is still very important. And I imagine just as like a broadcaster and a journalist, the difficulties in having to choose what stories to tell and how that plays a role in the work that you produce. I think it's ever changing. But at least for me at this point in my career, I'm choosing to make projects and series of works that all directly tie to where my interests are and the things that, keep me up at night. This series is connected to an experience I had going on a really fortunate artist experience where I got to go to Antarctica in the beginning of this year, which I'm pretty sure that I might be the first Somali Yemeni person to step foot on Antarctica.
I'm so jealous right now. I'm trying to contain my jealousy because that's like an ultimate trip for me that I've been planning from like my 40th birthday, is to go to Antarctica. Tell me more.
Oh yeah, it was honestly, it was overwhelming. It was unbelievably overwhelming. It felt like we went on this giant ship essentially, and we're amongst like climate researchers and folks that are trying to support climate change from like more business and capitalist perspective. And then you've had a few artists that were looking at it as an opportunity to be inspired. And so, and then all of us collectively having conversations in order to try and see where we fit into the greater conversation. And it felt like stepping into space, like an entirely different world. It was so silent. I think the thing that stuck with me is the silence and the calm, even though you're surrounded by seals and penguins that are, you know, fundamentally functioning from pure instinct, and you're watching, unfortunately, some of these animals die. And then you've got whales constantly like around, which was also like the most beautiful thing I'd ever witnessed. But the silence and the power of nature in its purest form. I think it's probably one of the only places on Earth that we haven't fully destroyed, or impacted visibly. And I found myself just looking at the water and looking at how the water and the ice play and have this like intricate dance where even though it was really calm at moments, there's still so much happening. Few of like ice chunks coming off parts of the continent, I guess. And the sound, like this booming, crackling, it almost feels like a building going down. And then seeing the ripples of that is essentially what's in this work. Like the idea of like elements in their purest form interacting together and having like this visceral tension and movement is kind of what I was thinking about. This is the most amazing trip. Like it's one thing that I wish I found myself breaking down a lot because I wanted my friends and my family to be able to witness it. And I was also taking in the fact that like the likelihood of them and the people that I care about witnessing it is highly uncertain and most likely never going to happen. And so wanting to be in the moment always to cherish that, but to also bring it back in a thoughtful way, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But it was unbelievable. I don't think any trip in my life is ever going to compare.
Many thanks to you, Emily, for such a thoughtful conversation. I encourage you to take a look at her latest works and to find out where she's exhibiting at themunamalik.com. That's themunamalik.com.
That's it for today. It's Bill King here. Jessica Bellamy, what's the word?
Have a great day, everyone.
There's also Gloria Martin and Jesse King. We all say goodbye. Take care. A big thank you for all who tuned in to Bill King Show. We'll catch you on the other side.